They're generally female, usually young, and always vulnerable. The victims of human trafficking are coerced into situations against their will. From commercial sexual exploitation to labor exploitation, human traffickers take advantage of victims as young as 12 years old. And a new planned homeless shelter in San Pedro is not ready yet. What officials hope to do in the meantime to alleviate the problem. Fox 11 News at Depth starts right now. Hello, everyone. I'm Hal Eisner. Lots going on this week in the news, new laws, new concerns by local government, and a new danger from tensions between the U.S. and Iran. Also today, the story of girls and women snatched from their homes and families, coerced by predators, and sold into prostitution. That may sound like something from a movie, but it is all too real. And some of those victims, not even in their teens, but there is hope and a coordinated effort across the nation to rescue the victims and prosecute the predators.
The first time I worked for him, I only had probably about 5 to 8 guys a day.
Crazy, I never thought, I wasn't a prostitute. I was doing this so that he'll love me.
5 men came in, and it went from a Friday night to a Sunday morning.
They're all survivors taken in by people who promised them one thing, only to find themselves trafficked for sex, unable to escape, unable to save themselves. Just a few of the tens of thousands of human trafficking cases that happen every year in the United States. And it's not just sexual exploitation. Vulnerable people are also convinced that they'll be getting good jobs, only to find themselves sold into virtual slavery. Worldwide, it's estimated that more than 40 million people across the globe were trafficked in 2016, and it's unlikely that number has decreased much. 99% of the victims are girls or women, and nearly 5 million of them are forced into prostitution. But efforts are being made to help victims break free from that dark world of exploitation. A number of groups have come forward to help the girls and women affected, and just this month, a new law went into effect in California, intended to educate those who are most likely to spot the signs of human trafficking and help them know what to do to help those victims.
I could see, 5, 10 men in a day. But I mean, when it was all day, it was all day. And it was all day and all night.
Joining us right now is LA County Supervisor Janice Hahn. We have an awful lot to talk with you about, including human trafficking. But big news this week was what happened with Iran and the United States. You were a congresswoman. You were in a position of being on the Homeland Security Committee in Congress. How did you take all this in this week? I'm curious what your reaction was.
Well, I'm sure I am like most Americans who were a little nervous last night, wondering if we were on the brink of war with Iran. And it took me back to the time where we were negotiating the Iran nuclear deal, and I was a member of Congress, and we took a very good, hard look at what that deal would mean. And part of the reason I voted for it was because I felt it would prevent what we were experiencing this week with the escalation between both of our countries.
I should probably point out here that we are recording this during the week. However, anything could happen between this day, which happens to be a Wednesday, and Sunday when this is airing. So let's assume that things settle down for a moment. And what is your sense of the direction of what we're doing with this country based on your experience in Congress?
Well, my experience in Congress said that diplomacy is always a better pathway to dealing with all these countries, particularly in the Middle East. I am hopeful that both sides will stand down a little bit and that we actually maybe could get back to the table and negotiate what the relationship between the United States and Iran will look like going forward.
But let me just ask you, is it too late to put that genie of negotiation back in the bottle?
Well, I don't think so, because it's clear that President Trump has reminded Iran of how powerful we are militarily. So I do think we do hold some leverage in trying to bring them back to the table to negotiate.
Something that President Trump said this week sort of resonated with a lot of people. Let's listen to this real quick.
As long as I'm president of the United States, Iran will never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. As we continue to evaluate options in response to Iranian aggression, the United States will immediately impose additional punishing economic sanctions on the Iranian regime.
Your goal in dealing with that treaty, nuclear treaty, was to prevent what we're seeing now.
Absolutely.
And you heard what he said. We're not going to have any more nuclear weapons in Iran. How do you square all this?
Yeah, it's hard to square for me because for me and being briefed in secure locations about what was happening, we really believed that having all the parties involved in negotiating the Iran nuclear deal would keep Iran from the ability to have the bomb. Nobody wants a nuclear weapon. That's everybody's fear. So I'm not really sure now how we prevent that if we untangle from the deal.
Right, but the thing is that when you have situations like this, it gets people nervous. And then you have to deal with security and homeland security. And so what's going on right now here in LA County?
Yeah, clearly in LA County, we are on a little bit of a high alert. Anytime we have this kind of an international incident happening, tensions rise, and we know in the LA County Sheriff's Department, we're certainly on high alert. And it goes back to, you know, if you see something, say something. I think everybody always needs to be vigilant, but it does make you nervous, and you're hoping, again, this would be a great time for our leaders to stand down a little bit, de-escalate the situation, and see whether or not there's some common ground in negotiating a future.
But down at the Kenny Hahn Justice Building, the building where the supervisors meet, is there a lot of talk about security right now? Is there a lot of talk among you supervisors about how to position yourself?
Well, I think we're always a little bit on alert in that building. You know, everyone that walks in has to go through a metal detector and have their belongings checked. So clearly we're always thinking about that, but we depend on our county sheriffs to inform us if there is any kind of impending or immediate threat beyond what we face.
So there's nothing immediate right now.
There's nothing
but
immediate.
But it's always good to know if you see something.
Say something.
Say something.
Yeah, be aware.
Good. All right. Coming up next on Fox 11 News in Depth, we take a look at the efforts being made to save women and girls from the grim fate of human trafficking. Supervisor Hahn will be back with us along with other guests. See you right back here. January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month, that designation issued by presidential proclamation in 2011. Unfortunately, human trafficking seems to be just as prevalent nearly a decade later. But progress is being made, including a new law that went into effect January 1st, mandating training for the staff of hotels and motels to make them aware of what to look for and how to help possible victims of human trafficking. Joining us along with Supervisor Hahn are now Mary David. She is a former prosecutor and a UN advisor, and also Elizabeth Gegner, who brings awareness about human trafficking through her Freedom Project. And thank you all for being here with us. And all right, so let's talk about this new law. Let's start with Mary. This law basically says that the idea is to try to make more people aware of what the signs are. Is that a good thing?
Oh, it's such a good thing. We often think that this is an issue with just law enforcement, but really, people in the community and hotel employees, they are the first line to identify a victim. When you talk about hotel staff, for example, from the valet to the bellman to the housekeeping staff, they are right there, and they may be the only person that a victim sees outside of their pimp and their John. And so their ability to now be able to identify and respond to victims is a huge victory.
Elizabeth Gegner, what's your sense? You've been doing this for a long time and helping young women who have been in this position.
Right. I mean, we've learned a lot through the implementation of training that we've done, and I think it's great whenever there's a law like this that's passed. And I think it's going to be really important that the way that it's rolled out, the way that it's enforced, and really equipping the staff to know how to react to it.
I want to be clear about something. This is our third show that we've talked about human trafficking.
That's
You've been on all three of those. And the first one, we were down at the Anaheim Police Department. We talked to them. They had decided this is not being a prostitute is not being a criminal. It is being a victim.
Absolutely.
That's where human trafficking first sort of started to come into law enforcement there, in at least for me. And then later we did a show where you talked about students from Orange County that were learning the tips of what to look for in case there were students in the high school that were. How's all that going?
That's going great. I mean, one of the things that I would say that we learned there that I would link to what's going on now with the hotels is that it's important to look at the entire environment when you implement training like that. So for example, when you go in and do this training in the hotels, it's really important that it comes as a mandate from senior leadership and that the message, the packaging of it. So the first reaction that people get when they do this training is initially, this is happening in Russia, it's not happening here. Same reaction we get anywhere when we start to bring these things, right? So to have senior leadership really believe and know that it's happening and have them preface the training is really important.
Do you have any idea how many women you've helped?
I probably don't know. I mean, people tell me all the time on the days where I get discouraged about it, they'll say, you have no idea how many people and who are the people that you've saved. Because our philosophy, and there's a lot of great organizations out there, but we've chosen to focus upstream to stop it before it starts. Because if people can know and distinguish the signs of someone that might be at risk and stop it before the damage is done, you prevent all that harm that is so hard to unwind.
And one of the things we do is we call people in this position survivors, as opposed to victims. And so, Supervisor, you too have brought forth some legislation to deal with this.
Well, it's so great to sit here with both of you and hear the work that you're doing, because we know that so many of these are women and young girls that fall prey to human trafficking and sex trafficking. So in LA County, of course, our law enforcement also doesn't consider them criminals. And so there's no arresting and putting them in our jails. There's no good outcome there. The other things we've done in LA County, we make all of our 110,000 employees in the county take training on how to identify someone who might be subject to human and sex trafficking. The other thing, I'm creating a new ordinance where health inspectors will go into some of these massage parlors and begin inspecting them, because many times these sex traffickers and human traffickers becomes a labor issue. And some of these places employ people at a very low cost, and you begin to realize that they're in trouble. And I think maybe our health inspectors can find that.
You're not trusting them to police themselves. You want to have others go in and do it for you. I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the things to look for, and perhaps we can look at the top 5 signs of human trafficking. I think one of the first ones is going to be signs of branding, like tattoos. Is this correct?
Absolutely. Branding is often used by pimps and traffickers in order to keep their victims feeling this sense of ownership over them. And so they will often have tattoos on all over their body, but typically on their face. They will brand them with the name of the pimp, and that's a way of signifying
it says I own you.
Right, exactly.
But basically is what that says. Then there are lies about age and personal documentation and identification.
Right. I mean, overwhelmingly, especially when you're talking about minors, they are not going to volunteer the information that they are a minor, and so they will usually lie about their age. There's also a high propensity for those who are trafficked into the country who have an illegal status or unclear paperwork for them to be unclear about their information because they're worried about the consequences.
And that's the issue of inability to clarify where they live, where they're from, where they're staying, that sort of thing. So when people who are watching right now run into something that looks suspicious, see something, say something?
Yes, absolutely. And then we know we have organizations. We know we have law enforcement now that's on your side. But, the other things I'm thinking about, this is why these homeless encampments are dangerous, because they become a magnet for this same kind of activity. And women and children are in these encampments who are fleeing possibly a domestic violence situation, and they become prey to these pimps for that kind of work. So.
All right, and that homelessness is something we're going to get into in the next segment. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. Coming up next on Fox 11 News in Depth, we talk about a project Supervisor Janice Hahn is looking to help alleviate the homeless crisis in part of her district. And we'll talk about a couple of other things as well. We'll be right back. Back with us now, LA County Supervisor Janice Hahn to talk about a couple of things that are dear to her heart. One of them, the perennial problem with the homeless crisis. There's an interim homeless shelter proposed in San Pedro, a shuttered building that once belonged to the county Department of Mental Health. It's already surrounded by a homeless encampment, but there are objections to opening it as a temporary shelter space. And I'd like to talk to you about that a little bit. We have video of this area. You can see an awful lot of homeless people out on the street, around the buildings. I know from our conversations that this is an area you're trying to address. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, first of all, tonight in Los Angeles County, Hal, we're going to have 60,000 people who are homeless. Some of them are sheltered, but not very many of them. In San Pedro, we have about 600 homeless people. So I have this vacant county health building, and around it is this encampment. I think, why not turn this into a temporary shelter, put some beds in there, have a nonprofit run it, and bring those people inside as soon as possible. We've got a crisis on our hands. I'm trying to do something that I think is common sense.
And we could see the tents. We're seeing tents everywhere, all over Los Angeles County. But the controversy on this comes from actually the city councilman who's in that district, Joe Biscaino, and he's got what he says are two other properties that are going to be turned into bridge homes, I guess. He says, and I've got a quote here, "I applaud Supervisor Hahn for the effort that she's making, her contribution to homeless solutions, and to urge her to implement the bridge home model that we are finding great success with in Los Angeles, opening this spring." He encourages Supervisor Hahn to expand a bridge home model to the rest of her district, including beach communities. We have a map here that shows basically, and it's provided by the councilman, that basically shows your district in the yellow, and all those little blue dots are bridge homes, and there's two down there in San Pedro, and the dot that's red is the one you want to turn into a bridge home. Why not find some other areas there in the yellow, which is also your district?
Well, we are. We're doing shelters in other parts of the district. We're looking to do one in Whittier. We have a shelter right now in Hacienda Heights that is 30 beds for women. The city of Bellflower is going to be doing a shelter that's going to house 100 people. Long Beach, of course, is doing a tremendous work in sheltering the homeless. So we are doing it in other parts of the district. This seemed to me to be a no-brainer.
Just because it was a vacant building.
It's a vacant building. We've got homeless people right sleeping on the doorstep. And I've heard from people everywhere that say, hey, county, hey, state, why can't you take some of those vacant buildings and turn them into shelters?
What would you say to the councilman?
Well, I would say, you know, I applaud his effort to do these bridge homes. I think that's important, and of course I support that. But I think this is an opportunity to turn something that's a vacant, unused building into sheltering those people who are sleeping out on the streets right now. It'll be done in 45 days, and I think we have a crisis. I would tell the council member,
crisis. There's no question about that.
Crisis. It's an emergency. If we had this many people displaced from their home because of a fire, a flood, an earthquake, we would bring all hands on deck. And to be honest with you, the governor just announced today that he's doing the same thing. He's going to be offering state property for us to use to shelter the homeless.
To help in the situation.
I think we all need to do everything we can immediately to get people off their streets.
Talk to me about fire, because you've got a proposal you want to put on the ballot that would be another tax initiative that would help paramedics.
So our LA County Fire Department is seeing more fires than they've ever seen before. We've also seen an increase of 50% of our medical calls to our paramedics. They haven't had an increase in their budget in about 20 years. They're not funded by the LA County's general fund budget. They're funded by property taxes in the cities that they serve. And they have asked us, the County Board of Supervisors, to put an initiative on the ballot this March that will ask the voters whether or not they think our fire department deserves a raise.
You're talking about a 6-cent parcel tax.
Yes, it would raise about $134 million annually, but we know that our fire department is about $1 billion short in what they need: new equipment, new fire engines, hire more staffing, hire more paramedics. So we want a world-class fire department in LA County, and I think the voters are going to agree.
I want to ask you about one more thing. A first of its kind flashing lights system. It's a notification system that's being tested at Torrance Beach. Can you tell us a little more about that?
So we've got a pilot program now at Torrance Beach for the hard of hearing and the deaf to be alerted to an imminent danger, whether it's a shark or a tsunami or a lightning strike, like get out of the ocean quickly. And it's a series of lights that will flash, so those who are hard of hearing or deaf will be able to realize they need to get out of the water immediately.
So the flashing that we're seeing in that video now is what we're talking about. Okay, it's 2020. Why has it taken so long to do this? Because flashing light systems for phones, for all kinds of things, have been used in the deaf community for years.
It's true, but all of our alerting on our beaches was all auditory. It took an LA County Beaches and Harbor Department staffer who has 2 adult children who are hard of hearing to finally realize that we needed a system on our beaches so that everybody feels safe. We want people to come to our beaches. We want them to be accessible. But this was a brilliant suggestion, and we're going to implement it.
We have about a minute left, maybe less. Tell me about the mobile stroke unit, because we talked about this last time. It brings a smile to your face. You really like this project.
It does. I mean, this is a unit that will roll out when someone is experiencing the symptoms of a stroke. And in this mobile stroke unit, a person can actually have their brain scanned. There's a CAT scan on board. There's a neurologist that can immediately determine.
And this can all be done by remote control.
Yes, can determine what kind of a stroke you're having. And I believe it will save lives. I believe it will prevent the debilitating effects that people experience after a stroke. It's the cutting edge of modern medicine in Los Angeles County.
Sounds like you have a lot on your plate.
I do. It's a good, but I like it.
It's good stuff.
It's good stuff.
Right. Despite the controversy in San Pedro.
And I don't think it's a controversy. I think we're all trying to do the same thing, and that's to try to do whatever we can to end homelessness in LA County.
Supervisor, thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it. We'll be back right after this. We'll continue our conversation on human trafficking on my podcast, What the How? On iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you subscribe to podcasts, or just go to whatthehowpodcast.com. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all next time.